what we experience in the aftermath of death. From the psychological point of view, death entails no slightest curtailment of individual existence. We have done this before. We have done existence and life, where we have seen that life is temporary, life is temporary, whereas existence is perennial, life is false, whereas existence is the truth, and so many other differences. So Baba says here that from a psychological point of view, death entails no slightest curtailment. There is no curtailment insofar as the individual existence is concerned. We have done this before, that what we consider as death is only the dropping of the physical body. The subtle and the mental continues its journey in a different domain. Then Baba goes on to say, this does not mean that the surviving mind, the mind survives till the end. The mind survives till there is what Baba calls it manonash. Manonash means mannonash, annihilation of the mind. Till that time, the mind remains surviving right from the start of creation till we achieve God realization. So here Baba says, this does not mean that the surviving mind remains unaffected. That means the mind does get affected by the kind of death. The word kind is in italics. That means what type of death are we experiencing? By the kind of death which severed the individual from the body, when the body was separated from the subtle and the mental bodies. Both the condition of the mind as well as its capacity to progress further in the life after death are often substantially determined by the conditions surrounding the death. In other words, at the time of death, what was the surrounding, what was the environment, what were the thoughts, what were the feelings, what were the emotions at the point of death determines a lot with regard to our existence in the after-death state. And we all know, we've been repeating it over and over again, that if we are fortunate enough to take the name of God at the point of death, then that particular soul achieves mukti or moksha.
From the standpoint of its psychic after effects, death can be classified into three broad types: 1. Normal, 2. Abnormal, and 3. Supernormal. Normal death follows an illness which ultimately renders the physiological functioning of the body impossible. Generally, it involves some kind of warning to the individual, for if the illness is severe, he often anticipates that death is at hand. Although by no means true of all deaths caused by illness, when the individual has some anticipation of impending death, he usually has a chance to tie up loose ends and prepare his mind for this new crisis.
So Baba says, broadly speaking, there are three types of death, they can be divided into three categories. The one is normal, the second is abnormal, and the third is supernormal. So these are the three distinct categories of death. Normal death. Now what is normal death? Normal death follows an illness which ultimately renders the physiological functioning of the body impossible. That means we call it organ failure, multiple organ failure. In other words, normal death occurs, in my understanding, when all our samskaras or impressions which we have brought in this incarnation, in this form, to be exhausted and experienced are getting over. That is where something or the other happens. There is any excuse, any cause, any reason for dying. And here in a normal death we say somebody has fallen ill, seriously ill. So there's no question of any physiological body continuing to remain. Generally, it involves some kind of warning to the individual, for if the illness is severe, he often anticipates that death is at hand. If somebody, like say for example, there are many serious illnesses, I may not name them, when the doctor says that, call the family, doctor says that he has only a few days to remain in this body, that means he will die. So in other words, we have a warning, we have a caution that this body cannot sustain that illness for a long period of time. Although by no means true of all deaths caused by illness, when the individual has some anticipation of impending death, he usually has a chance to tie up loose ends and prepare his mind for this new crisis. In my understanding, it's a very fortunate thing to happen to anybody who is informed that he has only a couple of days or a couple of hours to live in this particular body. Because then he anticipates that and he is mentally preparing himself to leave the body. He is trying to tie up loose ends, which could mean that supposing somebody is not getting along well with somebody, you forgive somebody or you ask for forgiveness or whatever that is pending in our mental clutter, you have an opportunity to clear up that clutter and clear up the mind and prepare yourself to have a different experience. The second or abnormal type of death is that which results from accidents, murder, war, and suicide. In accidents and murder, there is generally no anticipation of impending death. Being unexpected, death involves, in such instances, a shock which can shatter the very roots of the sanskaras, seeking expression through the physical incarnation of the individual. Now in the second type, which is called abnormal death. The first one was normal, and by normal I would mean when all the impressions are over, you just die. It may be any excuse. Most of the time it is an illness. It could be a short illness or it could be a long illness. But at least we know, we are prepared for it. And if we are wise, we do understand. If in our family somebody is very seriously ill, we do understand that that person has already exhausted, utilized, expended, experienced all the samskaras that the person has brought for experiencing, and now he is bidding tata bye-bye and going on to the other side of the fence, so to speak. But in abnormal death, Baba categorizes into 4 subsections, and that is murder, war. The first one is accidents. Accidents, murder, war, suicide. These are the 4 categories in abnormal death. Now, insofar as accident and murders are concerned, so there is generally no anticipation of impending death. Accident just happens, or somebody murders you, shoots, kills, whatever way, it is not an anticipated death. It is not, like pre-arranged that way. And so Baba says, being unexpected, it is not expected, being unexpected, that involves in such instances a shock which can shatter the very roots of the samskaras, seeking expression through the physical incarnation of the individual. Because it happens so all of a sudden, so unexpectedly, it gives a very rude shock to the mind. And when it gives a rude shock to the mind, all the samskaras which are loaded in the mind also gets very much shocked and shattered. So in a sense, that is helpful to the samskaras because it gets shattered. In anticipated accidental death,
The ordinary ego mind has a moderate tendency to gravitate towards the gross sphere and cling to it because of the ego mind's attachment to the gross world. In anticipated abnormal death, when resulting from murder or war, the ego mind can become bound to the gross world by the chains of unfulfilled revenge. There is less tendency for such binding to occur in death due to war than in that resulting from murder. In war, the combatants on both sides are often impersonal and their actions is impersonal in their actions and aware that they are fighting for some cause rather than through personal enmity. If this awareness is clear and steady, death in war does not yield the mental reaction of revenge.
Okay, let me read this. So we have seen broad categories, normal, abnormal, supernormal. In normal, we have seen because of illness. In abnormal, again, there are 4 categories: accident, murder, suicide, and war. All right. So now Baba says, in unanticipated accidental deaths, unanticipated, the ordinary ego mind has a moderate tendency to gravitate towards the gross sphere and cling to it because of the ego mind's attachment to the gross world. If you have seen the film called Ghost, there is some, you can see that the person accidentally, he dies, and the mind is separated from the body, and the mind wants to enter the body, the mind wants to talk to somebody, mind can see, the soul can see, but unable to get into the body again. So because of the attachment to the physical form. In anticipated abnormal death, when resulting from murder or war, now these are anticipated abnormal death, the ego mind can become bound to the gross world by the chains of unfulfilled revenge. Supposing you anticipate that you will be murdered, or supposing when you go to war, and obviously there is every possibility, not that everybody who goes to war die, but there is an anticipated thought that maybe I won't return home. So that is the meaning of anticipated abnormal death. But in anticipated abnormal death, Baba says that since we are bound to the gross world by the chains of unfulfilled revenge. Now there is a chain of unfulfilled revenge, more so in the case of murder and very little in case of war, which we will come to know. There is less tendency for such binding to occur in death due to war. In war, you don't have any personal enmity. You are not having any personal kind of a grudge against the other because you are killing somebody because it's a matter of duty. You are supposed to be killing the other. There is less tendency for such binding to occur in death due to war than in death resulting from murder. In war, the combatants on both sides are often impersonal in their actions and aware that they are fighting for some cause rather than through personal enmity. Some ideal, some cause, some order received from the superiors, and you are there to kill. That's about all. There's no personal enmity, personal revenge. If this awareness is clear and steady, death in war does not yield the mental reaction of revenge. There's no question of any revenge. You are just doing it as a matter of duty. I had narrated this before, that once a gentleman came to Baba and said that, well, I'm supposed to be drafted for war, I'm supposed to be going to war, what should I do? And Baba's advice to the gentleman was that, well, if you can avoid it, then avoid it. If you can't avoid it and you have to join war, join war. And if you are ordered to be at the forefront, so-called border, where you are supposed to see face to face and kill, do it. But whatever you do, there should be no personal enmity involved when you are shooting. There should be no kind of hatred towards your enemy. You are simply doing it, that means killing the other, out of a sense of duty. You are performing your duty, and there is no joy, there is no happiness that I have killed so many hundreds of people. There is no personal grudge, personal enmity, personal jealousy, personal hatred. No, it's duty. It is the duty that you are doing and performing. Then that's the advice which Baba gave to the gentleman. Among
abnormal kinds of death, suicide deserves special attention. Suicide may be divided into 4 grades. 1, lowest, 2, low, 3, high, and 4, highest.
Okay. Now, again, in the abnormal case, we have seen it, accidents, murder, suicide, and war. And Baba has covered already accidents, murder, and war. Now Baba says this suicide requires a special attention. And under the suicide, category of suicide also, Baba has categorized them into 4 different types. One is the lowest, low, high, and highest. So this is in a sense a revelation that even suicide can be highest, and even through suicide a man can achieve moksha. So we'll come to that later.
The lowest type is a last measure in escaping punishment or ignominy or utter frustration after the individual has tried unscrupulously to satisfy his own selfish desires. Thus, one who has committed murder for lust or power may commit suicide when he is caught. Even after leaving the body, such a person does not succeed in severing his link with the gross world for hundreds of years. These individuals live literally as ghosts in the semi-subtle sphere, which lies between the gross and subtle world. They experience agonizing suffering because of their unfulfilled desires. Due to the link which they preserve with the gross world, they continue to desire various gross objects keenly, a desire which can never be fulfilled. This suffering is even more acute than the intense sufferings in the hell state that the individual experiences after he severs his connection with the gross world. There's an asterisk for hell state. Neither hell nor heaven should be regarded as places. They are mental states and imaginary in the same sense that the world of duality also exists in the realm of illusion. See below.
All right. Now we are doing suicide, and Baba is talking about the lowest type of suicide, which is even worse than the worst of hell. That's what Baba is saying. The lowest type is a last measure in escaping punishment or ignominy. Ignominy would mean disgrace, shame, deep humiliation, or utter frustration after the individual has tried unscrupulously to satisfy his own selfish desires, unscrupulously, unethically, immorally, dishonestly, illegally. So a person is doing something which is illegal, which is immoral, which is not right to do, and a person gets caught. And now when the person is caught, in order to, to be out of the ignominy in a sense of a kind of humiliation, the person commits suicide in the erroneous thought, erroneous ignorant understanding that by committing suicide, I am freed from all these aspects. But the person doesn't know that all the impressions of whatever you have done unscrupulously are already embedded, etched in the mental body. So it is the mind which is the carrier of all these impressions. And when we commit suicide, you are actually punishing the body. You are cutting the body off in the hope that you are freed from all these aspects. In other words, because of the fault of the mind, you are punishing somebody else or something else, which is the body. If we understand that, then never anybody would commit suicide, because he knows that the mind will continue to hold those impressions. The body is not there. The mind cannot exhaust or experience those impressions, and therefore you have cut short your life by, say, X number of years in order to utilize those impressions. X raised to so many times, so many years you will have to spend. Let me give you an example. Supposing I am destined to live for 70 years, and at the age of 60 I do something and I commit suicide, then my impression, 10 years only, I have to suffer the state of ghost, so to speak, and that's okay, 10 years. But no, in those 10 years, under normal circumstances, if I had the body, I would have expended or experienced all those samskaras. But now that I do not have the body, I cannot spend those in 10 years. I may have to linger on limbo for hundreds of years or even for thousands of years. So we can imagine what a terrible state to be in. All right. Those who have committed murder for lust or power may commit suicide when he is caught. Even after leaving the body, such a person does not succeed in cutting off his link with the gross world for hundreds of years. These individuals live literally as ghosts in the semi-subtle sphere. In the semi-subtle sphere also, there are various gradations. Semi-subtle sphere is where a disincarnate soul will go and experience the state of acute pleasure, mental pleasure, or acute mental suffering, which is called hell, heaven and hell. But here this is the lowest. You don't go to the heaven state. Heaven state, to forget it. You don't even go to the hell state. What you will experience is only as a ghost. You are there only as a ghost. That means at the lowest level of semi-subtle world, we will be existing. These individuals live literally as ghosts in the semi-subtle sphere, which lies between the gross and the subtle world. They experience agonizing is terrible, torture, agonizing suffering because of their unfulfilled desires. There are so many desires, there are so many samskaras left, residual samskaras left to be experienced. And now that there is no body, there is terrible, extreme suffering over a long period of time, which is called the agonizing period. Due to the link which they preserve with the gross world, they continue to desire various gross objects keenly, a desire which can never be fulfilled. This suffering is even more acute than the intense sufferings in the hell state that the individual experiences after he severs his connection with the gross world. In other words, you have artificially, in a very abnormal way, cut short your living on earth. But the mind is there, the desires are there, the samskaras are there. They want to find fulfillment, and because the body is not there, how will they find fulfillment? They are in a terrible state of suffering. Yeah.
So I'm asking, for example, I am the worst person possible. I spend my life doing all sorts of sins to be saved, and then I die natural death. I will experience the
state of hell. But not this ghost limbo.
Not this ghost limbo.
No.
But if I also commit suicide after doing all this, that, so this is the worst.
That is the worst. That's why about Hitler, Baba had said that he had committed a lot of whatever you call it, tortures, murders, etc., atrocities. And Baba had passed a remark, had he not committed suicide, had he been, court-martialed and shot or done away with in a military way or whatever way, hanged or whatever it is, he would have benefited much more. Then he would have gone to the hell state directly. But here he will not even get the entry permit. Here you should carry a permit. In the hell state, he will suffer the state of limbo. That way. So that is the worst. There's nothing worse than that.
For hundreds of years.
It could be thousands. Who knows? That is why many times wherever Baba went, there are ghosts following him and troubling him, wanting to have close connection, contact with Baba, pleading and asking for mercy, to be relieved from the ghost state, to go into the hell state and pass the hell state time and then come back into the incarnation. So that is one of the reasons why Baba always wanted some human being, which is Mandali members, to be alert and not sleep when Baba is sleeping. So when you are conscious, when you are alert, the ghost will not harass Baba or disturb Baba in his restful. Baba never sleeps the ordinary sleep that we have. It's a rest. But even in that rest, the ghost would trouble him. But if somebody is awake, that's why Baba's instruction to the night watch would be, one is not to move, not to, make noise, and to stay alert all the time. Means awake, not to sleep, that way.
A somewhat less acute class of suffering in imagination is experienced in the hell state by suicides who have been slightly better motivated but who are still classified as low. In this group are those motivated by sheer disgust with life. Thus, a person suffering from bad health or stricken by a loathsome disease, or one who is poverty-stricken and ashamed of being a burden on others, might put an end to his life through lack of will to live.
So the earliest one was what Baba calls the lowest type of suicide. Now slightly better than the lowest is the low type of suicide, where he is not hanging himself on the wall, on the ceiling fan, or shooting or cutting the nerve, and he's not doing any of these things. He has lost the will to live because of certain reasons. So here Baba says, a somewhat less acute class of suffering in imagination. I like the word suffering in imagination, because all suffering is imagination. Even all joy is imagination. A somewhat less acute class of suffering in imagination is experienced in the hell state by suicides who have been slightly better motivated, but who are still classified as low, not the lowest. In this group are those motivated by sheer disgust with life. You are disgusted with life. Thus a person, example Baba gives, suffering from bad health or stricken by a loathsome disease. A loathsome disease where your entire body is rotting, yucky, offensive. The body is going through certain disease. Yeah, go ahead.
So nowadays there is a concept of assisted suicide. In some countries, I think only 1 or 2 countries allowed that if you are alive and cannot do anything.
Euthanasia.
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 Also. Yeah. So I think this also falls in this category.
I would say yes. My understanding is euthanasia is you are taking your own. Of course, there are certain, it may be legally correct, but it may not be spiritually correct, for a simple reason that the very fact that we are born in this body is to spend all the impressions that we have brought. And by cutting short the life prematurely, before the entire impressions are done away with, I personally feel that that soul also will definitely suffer, mentally suffer. Body is not there. And yes, it may come into this category. It could. Yeah. So here Baba says, there's a person suffering from bad health or stricken with loathsome disease, a disease which is revolting, which is yucky, which is very offensive.
Leprosy was considered
Leprosy, yeah, loathsome.
Now it is
Or
cleansing.
one who is poverty stricken, so poor and ashamed of being burdened on others, might put an end to his life through lack of will to live. So Baba says that comes under the low category of suicide.
Since the cause of such a suicide is revulsion from earthly life, the ego mind does not continue to maintain any enduring link with the gross world beyond the normal 3 or 4 days following death. After that normal period, the link is snapped and the ego mind then begins to experience the intense suffering of its bad sanskaras, usually termed the hell state.
Because there is a repulsion, dislike, disgust towards life, the mind may not continue to linger on with its link with the gross world and the gross forms, because there's a revulsion, but it will continue to remain connected with the gross only for the usual, where normally that takes place 3 or 4 days. So let me repeat this again. Since the cause of such a suicide is revulsion that we have seen from earthly life, the ego mind does not continue to maintain any enduring link with the gross world beyond the normal 3 or 4 days following death. So we get this, and in most religions I think it is there, that for about 3 to 4 days the spirit, the soul continues to hover around or continues to have a link with the grossness, especially at the place of death, or especially where people...
Your favorite place at home.
Yeah, so that way it lingers, but that is only for the period of about 3 or 4 days, and that is perhaps the reason why on the 4th day there are certain ceremonies in most religions, and it is assumed that after the 4th day, the soul continues its journey onwards, it goes on to the other side, and thereafter it has no spatial connection with the gross. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think in Christianity and in Islam, there is a concept of if a person, I don't know about Islam, but it's there in Christianity that after suicide, the person will not get heaven. So there is it's written in Bible or something, in New Testament.
No, but if it is written that if somebody commits suicide, he will not get to heaven. Why heaven? He will not even go to hell. He will not. If it is the lowest type of suicide, he won't even go to hell. He'll be... See, it is in the astral world, as I said, there are layers, and I assume there are 7. And the lowest is very much associated or very much closer to the gross. And that is the reason why the gross samskaras, which are still there in the mental body, cannot be experienced, and that is why they form what we call as ghost, and they try to satiate their desires through entering into somebody's body and satisfying their desires. That's why we sometimes call that obsession or possession, we call it. Yeah. All right. After that normal period, the link is snapped, and the ego mind then begins to experience the intense suffering of its bad sanskaras, usually termed as the hell state.
Although a ghost caught in the semi-subtle sphere suffers even more acutely than does the ego mind experiencing the hell state, the latter achieves some exhaustion of evil sanskaras while the former does not. Further, the sufferings of the ghosts who maintain their link with the earthly life are more tantalizing because the link constantly holds before them the prospect of fulfillment of gross desires without actual means for their satisfaction.
Okay. Although a ghost caught in the semi-subtle sphere, a ghost is somebody who has committed suicide, the lowest type, and who is in the lower rung of the semi-subtle world, who has a lot of desires, gross desires, but cannot find fulfillment because there is no gross body. So that is, we understand that. Although a ghost caught in the semi-subtle sphere suffers even more acutely than does the ego mind experiencing the hell state, which is the low type of suicide we have seen. The latter, which means the one who is experiencing the hell state, The latter achieves some exhaustion of evil sanskaras, while the former does not. Because in the hell state, when you are suffering, you are actually exhausting those sanskaras. But this gentleman who has committed the lowest type of suicide does not even get into the hell state. He is in a limbo, as so to speak. As a result of which, what happens is that in order for the latter, that means in order for somebody who has got the entry permit into the hell state, he has got the opportunity of exhausting the samskaras through experiencing suffering. But the one who is in the ghost state also experiences suffering, but cannot exhaust the sanskaras because there is no modus operandi, there is no methodology in which he can exhaust the samskara. The only thing he can do is possess and come out, possess somebody and come out. So here Baba says, the suffering of the ghosts who maintain their link with the earthly life are more tantalizing. They are very much, sorry? Tempting. Because the link constantly holds before them the prospect of fulfillment of gross desire. It is like, dangling a carrot. But there's no carrot. It goes away. You see, it's so tantalizing. You feel that you will be able to fulfill your gross desires, but you cannot. So here Baba says, because the link constantly holds before them the prospect of fulfillment of gross desires, without actual means for their satisfaction. For the actual means, it means that you should have a physical body in order to satisfy my gross samskaras. But there is no physical body. So there is only a hope and disappointment, So there is suffering that way.
The general belief that suicide is bad is due to the fact that it is usually the result of low motives or a cowardly attitude towards life. When suicide is employed as an escape from dilemmas brought on by failure to cope with the needs of life, it is not only ignoble but far-reaching as well in its demoralizing effects upon the victim.
No, the word tantalizing, we did say that it is very, what did you say?
Tempting.
Tempting. But there's another meaning to that, and which I had written out. It is tantalizing, it is unobtainable. It is tormenting. It is teasing. You are teasing somebody. Come, I'll give you food. And it's a mirage kind of thing. And it is very exciting. You get excited when you see a tempting thing. But when you go there, there is no such thing.
Because there is no instrument to consume
Body.
it.
There is no gross body. And that is why they possess. But how long will that two people stay?
Okay. All right. The general belief that suicide is bad is due to the fact that it is usually the result of low motives or a cowardly attitude towards life. The moment we hear the word suicide, impression is it is horrible, it is bad, the person will suffer tremendously, the person will become a ghost and torment everybody and trouble, and that's the impression. But Baba says that it is not so. It doesn't mean that all suicides are bad. Only those suicides which have been committed owing to low motives, those are bad. When suicide is employed as an escape from dilemmas brought on by failure to cope with the needs of life, it is not only ignoble but far-reaching as well in its demoralizing effects upon the victim. In other words, Baba has said there are 4 types of suicide, and we have done this: the lowest, low, high, and highest. So the first 2 are ignoble. The first 2 definite. Sorry?
Disgraceful.
Yeah, it is disgraceful. Yeah. So that the third and the fourth type. Now you write.
The
Read.
third or high type of suicide is in no way rooted in inferior motives and is therefore free of their deteriorating effects. It is inspired by altruistic motives alone and is a sacrifice made to secure the material or spiritual well-being of others. One who meets death through, example, hunger strike, in order to better the welfare of the masses, is a suicide of this high type.
So now we are talking about the high types of suicide, which are not rooted in cowardice, which are not rooted in low motives, which are not rooted in escaping the punishment after doing some kind of unscrupulous things. They are not rooted there. They are rooted at a with a higher motive. So Baba says, the third or high type of suicide is in no way rooted to inferior motives and is therefore free of their deteriorating effects. They are free from the bad effects of suicide. It is inspired by altruistic motives alone. Altruistic would mean unselfish motive for the concern and well-being of the other. Philanthropic motives, something which are good, the motives are very high. It is not connected with selfishness. So the motives are concern, care, love, happiness, goodness for the other. So then they come under the high type. Alone and is a sacrifice made to secure the material or spiritual well-being of others. One who meets death through, example, a hunger strike, in order to better the welfare of the masses, is a suicide of this type. Of this high type, yeah. So in other words, somebody who dies when he is on a hunger strike, and the hunger strike is honestly and sincerely for the well-being of the other, not like how many people go on hunger strike just to let their names come in the newspaper and the media. No, not that type. The genuinely you are interested in some well-being of the other, and then when you die, then that is the type of the high type of suicide.
The motives of such a suicide are not far different from those of martyrs who lay down their lives on the battlefield for country, society, or religion. The total absence of base motives in this high type of suicide makes it entirely different from the lower grades. As in other noble acts of self-effacement, such highly motivated action entitles the departed individual to the privileges and pleasures of the heavenly state and also constitutes a definite asset in his spiritual ongoing.
So that means that those who are martyrs, those who die protecting their countries, those who die in wars, that is the high type of suicide, and they will enjoy heaven, and they will also be spiritually benefited. The motives of such a suicide are not far different from those of martyrs who lay down their lives on the battlefield. Martyrs are those who sacrifice their lives based on certain principles, lives on battlefield or for country, society, or religion. The total absence of the base motive. So the importance of any action in spirituality is the motive behind the action and not the motive per se, not the motives in itself. So here the motives are not base, the motives are not self-centric, the motives are not selfish. The total absence of base motives in this high type of suicide makes it entirely different from the lower grades. The two lower grades we did, the lowest and the low. So this is on the high side. As in other noble acts of self-effacement, ego effacement, they are called noble acts. As in other noble acts of self-effacement, such highly motivated action entitles the departed individual to the privileges and pleasures of the heavenly state, and also constitutes a definite asset in his spiritual ongoing. In other words, such selfless act, which are in terms of, doing something for the country, doing something for religion, doing something for the society, and if they are done purely from selfless motive, and if a person dies doing that, then what Baba says is they are entitled to the privileges and the pleasures of the heavenly state. And not only that, but they also get a boost, a kind of an asset in their spiritual ongoing.
A suicide inspired by ordinary altruistic motives is not the highest type. The fourth or highest class results from intense desire to see God or to unite with Him. This is an extremely rare occurrence. In most cases in which suicide is believed to have been committed for the sake of God, there is an admixture of other motivating factors such as dissatisfaction with conditions in earthly life. If and when suicide is embraced purely for the sake of attaining God, it can have the effect of achieving liberation or mukti. The masters have always warned aspirants against resorting to suicide in the intensity of the longing for union with God, for there is too great room for self-deception and inadvertent admixture of inferior unconscious motivation.
So Baba says this fourth type of suicide, which is considered to be the highest type of suicide, if done with absolute honesty and sincerity and purity, for only and solely for the longing of God, in the intense longing to become one with God, if you die during that period of intensity of your love and longing for God, then you can even achieve mukti or liberation or moksha. But Baba says the masters warn those people who want to have this adventure of committing suicide through because if there is a slightest admixture of personal gain, or there is slightest selfishness, there is no absolute, total, unadulterated purity, then that you will not reach that goal. So Baba says, a suicide inspired by ordinary altruistic motives, that is what we did earlier, for the good of the other and all that, it is not the highest type. So Baba said that is high, that is good, that is high. You will experience the state of heaven, no doubt, but that is not the highest type. The highest type is the fourth, which results from intense desire to see God or to unite with Him. This is an extremely rare occurrence. Why it is extremely rare? Because in the process of your longing to become one with God, even if there is a single thought of selfishness, of self-gain, then the whole process is smashed. So here Baba says, in most cases in which suicide is believed to have been committed for the sake of God, there is an admixture of other motivating factors such as dissatisfaction with conditions in the earthly life. In other words, I am pretending, I am a hypocrite, I am posing as if I am intensely and deeply in love of God, and I want to achieve oneness with God through this procedure, but at the back of it, the background of it is, I am dissatisfied with life. There is dissatisfaction with something happening back home. And that is why it is not pure, unadulterated longing and love for unity with God. Then in that case, you are running a very high risk. You will not only not get the mukti or moksha, but you might even get, you might get perhaps heaven state. That is not mentioned over here. So Baba says, there is a more, if and when suicide is embraced purely for the sake of attaining God, it can have the effect of achieving liberation or mukti. Liberation or mukti would mean that that particular soul experiences infinite bliss eternally. That soul does not come back, punarjanam as we call, in the reincarnation process. The masters have always warned aspirants against resorting to such as to suicide in the intensity of their longing for union with God, for there is too great room for self-deception. We deceive ourselves, we hoodwink ourselves, we fool ourselves into thinking that I am in intense love for God, but at the back of the mind there is some other motive which has driven us to take this action. An inadvertent admixture, inadvertent means through mistake, by mistake, inadvertent admixture of inferior unconscious motivation. So if the motivation is not purely union with God, this is a very tricky or a very unsafe thing to do.
Regardless of the abnormality of the circumstances which may lie back of it, no type of death can really damn the individual forever. It is never more than an incident in his long spiritual journey.
So again and again Baba is saying that there is no such thing as you are damned eternally to hell, something like that. There is no eternality. The eternality, it is all, even if you are in a state of limbo as a ghost, you may stay for 100, 200, 500, few thousand years, but somehow or the other, the mechanics is such that if such a person, such a ghost, such a spirit approaches a perfect master, a living perfect master, or the avatar, the perfect master, because they are all very magnanimous, very loving, very benevolent, they might just give a touch so that the ghost is relieved of its being a ghost and experience the... In the hell state, you can progress. In the ghost state, you are in a limbo. You can't go here, you can't go here. So there is no such thing as eternally there is nothing. So Baba says, regardless of the abnormality of the circumstances which may lie back of it, whatever the circumstance, no type of death can really damn the individual forever. It is never more than an incident in his long spiritual journey. In other words, death is only an incident in life.
The third or supernormal type of death consists in leaving the body voluntarily. This is done by the advanced yogis who wind up their earthly careers after fulfilling their mission, much as the student locks up his textbooks after passing his examination. The supernormal or voluntary death of the advanced yogi is definitely anticipated and willed, but is entirely different from suicide insofar as motives, results, and manner of leaving the body are concerned.
So we had seen earlier there are three types of suicides, three types of death, normal, abnormal, supernormal. Under normal we saw about illnesses, about abnormal we have seen about accidents, murder, suicide and war. Under suicide we have seen different types of suicide, which is the lowest, the low, the high and the highest. Now we come to the third type of death, which is the supernormal death. So now the third or supernormal type of death consists in leaving the body voluntarily. You are leaving the body voluntarily. This is done by the advanced yogis who wind up their earthly careers after fulfilling their mission, much as the student locks up his textbooks after passing his examination. The yogi who is of a very high order, he knows his mission is over and he wants to drop his body, and that is the supernormal type of death. The supernormal or voluntary death of the advanced yogi is definitely anticipated and willed. It is anticipated, like in the first, we have seen that in war, there is an anticipated, this thing in suicide, there is an anticipated death. Here also it is anticipated and willed, but is entirely different from suicide insofar as motives, results, and manner of leaving the body are concerned. The motive is not cowardice, the motive is not running away from ignominy. The motive is that I have done my work, whatever I have done, I have finished the role that I had to play, and now the time is there to will that I leave my body.
Friends and relatives of a departed one often are seriously upset by his death because the dissolution of the form may seem to them to be the extinction of life itself. All of their attachments had been related to the form. It was because of the form that they had contact with the soul, and it was through the form that their various physical and emotional needs were fulfilled. The disappearance of the body that had acted as the vehicle of the soul is therefore often interpreted by them as the annihilation of the individual himself.
So now we have done that part. Now Baba talks about how each one of us respond to death. Friends and relatives of a departed one often are seriously upset by his death, because the dissolution of the form may seem to them to be the extinction of life itself. We have done this earlier, that life continues its onward journey in another domain. It is just that the physicality is left, the physical form is not there. We are not able to see the physicality of that particular spirit, and therefore we feel that the life has ended. All of their attachments had been related to the form. All our attachments with each other basically are related to the form. It is because of the form that they had contact with the soul, and it was through the form that their various physical and emotional needs were fulfilled. We are always interacting form to form, form to form, form to form. We are never going deeper than the form. The disappearance of the body that had acted as the vehicle of the soul is therefore often interpreted by them as the annihilation of the individual himself. Here it's a very important sentence. I would say that the body is only acting as the vehicle of the soul. The spirit or the soul is eternal, it is immortal, it is indivisible actually, and it is infinite. But here we are talking about the self or the soul. Here Baba says that the body is merely a vehicle for the soul. And we have done this some time back, that actually it is the spirit and not the soul. Is therefore often interpreted, or rather I would say misinterpreted by us, as if the body has gone, that means the individual has also gone.
From the purely physical point of view, death does not involve annihilation of even the body, but physiologically it has become unfit to be continued to be the continued dwelling place of the spirit, and has therefore lost all importance.
From the purely physical point of view, death does not involve annihilation even of the body, Baba says physiologically, as a physiologically, it has become unfit. The body, when it becomes unfit to continue to harbor, to give what you call as live and license, LNL, for the soul to stay in that particular body, and that is the time when the body just drops. So I'll repeat, it has become unfit to be the continued dwelling place of the spirit, and has therefore lost all importance. So in the natural death, in the normal death, which we saw earlier on today, is when all the samskaras or impressions are exhausted. That is the time it is felt that the body is not necessary now, because the body which we have taken for a certain purpose and the purpose was to experience the impressions. And now that the impressions are experienced, the body is dropped. It may not necessarily always be that the body is unfit to harbor the spirit, or the body is unfit, Baba uses the word, to allow the spirit as a continued dwelling place. Sometimes the body may be really strong. There's nothing wrong with the body. The body is quite hale and hearty. But then how come the person is dying? Because the impressions or the samskaras that were brought are all exhausted, and therefore the purpose for the vehicle is over. Like, say, for example, I have a vehicle, car, I have to go from place A to place B. Now when I go from place A to place B, I do not sit inside the car all the time. I move out, I let the car park. So the car is over with. So in the more or less analogy is that we have come in this car, in this vehicle, to experience certain things, and when all the experiences are over, then I just move away, and the car is lifeless, so the car is either cremated or whatever that may be, right?
From the point of view of the individualized soul as mind, death does not involve any loss whatsoever, as the mind and all its sanskaras remain intact. The individual in essence is thus in no way different. He has only cast off his external coat. Nevertheless, this severance from the physical body is fraught with two important consequences. It is a means of introducing the individual to a new type of existence, and it is also in itself the incident of the most unimportant, because of the side effects of the greatest practical consequence.
Now let us try to understand this. From the point of view of the individualized soul, we have done in the last session individualized soul or ego mind. Individualized soul as mind, death does not involve any loss whatsoever. From the standpoint of the mind or the individualized soul, death does not involve any loss whatsoever. Why? Because the mind is continuing. The mind is continuing its journey. As the mind and all its sanskaras remain intact, there is no change in that. The individual in essence is thus in no way different. He has only cast off his external coat. Thus the coat is removed. Nevertheless, this severance, that means this separation from the physical body, is fraught with two important consequences. It is a means of introducing the individual to a new type of existence. Now when I drop my body, at the moment I am experiencing one type of existence. When the body is not there, and when the mind continues its journey onwards in the acute state, acute mental happiness or joy, which is called the state of heaven, or acute mental pain or suffering, which is called the state of hell, I am exposed now to a different set of existence. So Baba says that two important concepts. It is a means of introducing the individual to a new type of existence, and it is also in itself an incident of utmost importance because of side effects of the greatest practical consequences. My understanding would be that every death, what are the side effects or what are the every death, if that is subject to, if we don't remember Baba at the time of breathing last, then our last, then we go into the heaven or hell state. Every death is like a shaking, it's a shock, it's a shaking of the samskaras. Though all the samskaras which are tightly well-knit closet, in a sense, gets shaken up. Especially in the case of, what we have seen, in the case of war, or in the case of murder, in the case of accident and murder, all of a sudden you get a rude shock and they are shaken up. The samskaras are shaken up. And the second important thing is, in the process of enjoying or suffering, in the heaven or hell state, we are in a different state of mind where we have the time and the opportunity, without being goaded or pushed by the past samskaras, to review our life, what we have just left, and frame by frame. You can rewind, you can forward, you can rewind, you can forward. Learn the lessons as to what you have done, what you ought not to have done, or what you did not do, what you ought to have done, and that becomes you can say a capsule of intuition in your next life. So these are the important aspects of life, of death, because death is so much essential for us to continue our spiritual progress.
When others die, the individual loses only one or at most a few friends who have played an important role in his earthly existence. But when he dies, he loses at one stroke all the persons who had entered intimately into his own life. He also loses all his possessions and is broken away from the achievements on which he had built the very foundations of a sense of accomplishment in life.
So now Baba is saying that some people die, my family members, my friends, relatives, etc. Then I am losing out on 1, 2, 5, 10 people. That's about all. When others die, the individual loses only one or at the most a few friends who have played an important role in his earthly existence. But when he dies, that means when I die, he loses at one stroke all the persons who had entered intimately into his own life. So when we die, we have lost everything. We have lost everybody in that. He also loses all his possessions and is broken away from the achievements on which he had built the very foundation of his sense of accomplishment in life. I am like so-and-so, I have achieved so-and-so, I have earned so many awards, I have got so many fixed deposits, I have got so many shares, mutual funds, this, that. In one stroke, everything just goes when we die. So it is a good thing that we should not be attached to such things. And that is why Baba earlier on says in the normal death with illness, that once we realize, why should we wait till we realize that I am going to die? Doctor says, Abhi, in a week's time or in a few hours' time he is going to die. Then you have an opportunity to tie up the loose ends and give all your passwords to your wife or husband and give all the things and finish. So you have the opportunity to tying up your loose ends. You see, so why should we wait till that time? Why can't we be prepared? Now, on a very practical, writing of a will, I'm talking very gross practicality. Writing of a will, which is hopefully registered, or maybe you can say giving nominations in your accounts, or so many things you can do right now. You should not say, oh, I am not going to die. That can happen anytime. So we need to be prepared in such a way, because if that happens, or for that matter, taking insurance if you are in that bent of mind, so that if something happens, at least the people are not stranded. So what Baba is trying to say, that when he dies, in one stroke, everything just vanishes. And if we are prepared for that, if that thought is, in a sense, uppermost in our life, then much of our stress, of disputes, of quarreling, of fighting for small petty things, we realize what is there. Like there was a nice WhatsApp which says that at the most, our children and grandchildren, that's about all. Beyond that, nobody will know who you are. You will be, if at all you are fortunate, you will be in a photo frame, in a family photo frame. And if at all somebody knows, oh, this is my great-grandfather, that's about all. Finished. There's absolutely no, what should I say, recognition. This is so-and-so, this is so-and-so. And here, while we are in the body, we are sort of, not living a life whereby every moment is a moment of opportunity to come closer to Baba, through loving Him and through remembering Him and loving each other, treating each other with love and respect. So here Baba in short says is that when you die, everything is just cut off in one jhatka, in one moment, everything is over with. As the crowning touch.
As the crowning touch, he must also leave behind the very physical body with which he had identified himself so completely that he was rarely capable of imagining himself as anything but that physical body. This complete annihilation of the entire structure of the individual's earthly existence is therefore a crisis without parallel in his life.
So forget about my possession, my flat, my car, my this, my that, my investment. Forget about that. Even my body goes away, with which I have so closely associated myself. So as the crowning touch, he must also leave behind the very physical body with which he had identified himself so completely that he was rarely capable of imagining himself as anything but that physical body. This complete annihilation of the entire structure of the individual's earthly existence is therefore a crisis without parallel in his life. Now, if we do not want to feel that this is a crisis, and that's why Baba, in the last session we said that actually I am not the physical body. And the prayer I had said, I would like to repeat it, where Baba had given this prayer to the Mandali to be recited for a certain period of time. It goes like, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not this, I am not that, I am nothing but a living lie of that truth. That is me. And unless the lie is dead, the truth cannot be. So in other words, this is a lie. My imagining myself as this body is an illusion, is a lie. Why can't we, just I think the last session we did, why can't we structure our language in such a manner that slowly and steadily we talk about the body as the body and not the body as I. We did that in the last session. For example, if I am ill, I am sick, I don't say, I am ill. I will say, my body is ill. Or my body is paining. I have pain? No, my body is paining. So I am not the body is a very powerful thought of dissociating ourselves from the body. The body should not be over-pampered. The body has to be taken care of. The body has to be nursed. The body has to be kept clean. The body has to be given the right nutrition, etc. But you should not be overtly attached to the body, not only of the other's body, but even to our body. And to that extent, I think it will make our further journey more easy, because already we have established that I am immortal, I am eternal, nothing will happen to me. Anything that is happening just to my body. And I had related this earlier, I am digressing. There was a jnani, a knowledgeable person, who was asked, he was a pan bidi shopkeeper. His name is known as Nisarga Datta Maharaj. I have narrated this before. He was just a small bidi shop, pan bidi shop, and he was a jnani, and people would come to him for getting the knowledge. And so he was asked, how is it that you became so jnani, so knowledgeable? And the way you talk, it gives an impression that you know so much, you know everything. And what he said was, and it is very, very important, what he said was that my guru, my master, told me once that you are eternal, you are infinite, you are not this body. And since these words came from the mouth of my own master, whom I revere, whom I acknowledge, whom I love, whom I respect, I started thinking, feeling, and behaving as if I am infinite. I am infinite because my master said I am infinite. That means there is not a place where I am not there. I am infinite. I am eternal. Eternal refers to the time. I always was, I am now, and I will ever remain. My body will go, but I will always remain. So I am infinite and I am eternal. And I kept on thinking about that, feeling about that, and automatically behaving like that. Now just imagine if I am eternal and infinite, whom do I hate? Whom do I get angry upon? For whom I shall be greedy? To whom should I have a lusty thought? Because it's I, everything, the real I. So automatically all those apparently negative areas of our thinking, anger, greed, lust, jealousy, hatred, pride, egoism, attachment, they just all fell off. They just all fell off because I experience myself as infinite and eternal only because my master said so. And he achieved that. Such a simple but profound modus operandi, you may say, methodology of experience ourselves as infinite and eternal. So it's like that. Have I read this?
This
No.
critical...
A minute. Yeah.
This critical turning point which occurs at death is attended by both advantages and disadvantages. The greatest disadvantage lies in the fact that the individual must leave incomplete all the undertakings of his earthly life. He must leave the entire chessboard without taking any further interest in it. The scene of his life is blotted out and the chain of his mundane interests is hacked apart.
This critical turning point. What is the critical turning point? A time when I am supposed to leave this body. And I'm so, what should I say, fascinated, attached, pet. Everybody has a pet project, a pet thinking process, And that is Baba's last point in his My Wish, where Baba says, whosoever takes my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. Comes to me means that particular soul achieves mukti or moksha or liberation. That particular soul experiences infinite bliss eternally. That particular soul has no need to reincarnate. Such a profound statement Baba made in My Wish. So I get stuck up there. So why do we bother about so many other things that is happening in life, so many other pathways of karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, doing meditation, doing concentration, observing silence, doing japa-tapan. Why do we get into, this is my way, I'm not saying it is right or wrong, good or bad. Why don't we just focus on one thing, remembering Baba as often as we can in the midst of our daily activities. Remember. And pray to him to help us to remember him when we breathe our last. And if we do that, then the whole game is over. So here the critical turning point which occurs at death is attended by both advantages and disadvantages. The greatest disadvantage lies in the fact that the individual must leave incomplete all the undertakings of his earthly life. Everything just snaps in 1 second, less than a second. He must leave the entire chessboard without taking any further interest in it. I have started a project, halfway through, tata bye-bye, over with. I have to leave, that's Baba calls it, in a sense, disadvantage. The scene of his life is blotted out. Blotted out would mean obscured, becomes, disappears, obsolete, finished. Is blotted out, and the chain of his mundane interests. I've got so many interests, I want to do this, I want to achieve this, I want to become this, etc., is hacked apart, hacked, slashed, chopped, cut. In one jhatka, it is over with. Go ahead.
From the standpoint of objective achievement, the continuity of his undertaking has undergone an abrupt break. Advancement of the projects he has left behind must come from his previous associates and can no longer be his concern. It is rare for the individual to be drawn back through a sanskaric linking to the identical task which he had begun in a past incarnation, to develop it on from the point where his successors had left it.
So from the point of view of objective achievement, objective, I have done this, I have achieved this, I have made this, whatever that may be, the continuity of his undertaking has undergone an abrupt break, cut, over. Advancement of the projects he has left behind must come from his previous associates. I was associated with my staff, my whosoever people. So now I have gone and they should now continue that particular project and can no longer be his concern. It is no more my concern because I am God, so-called dead and gone, and now they will continue. It is rare for the individual to be drawn back through a sanskaric linking to the identical task which he had begun in the past incarnation, to develop it from the point where his successors had left. Now here, at elsewhere, Baba says something different, but here we are reading this, so let us understand. I had a project, I had so many people working under me, my managers, general managers, supervisors, etc. I am dead and gone. They have continued the project, and the project has gone from, let's say, from year to year. Now in my next reincarnation, it is very unlikely that I may take on from where they have left and continue that particular project.
It would be a mistake to think that death brings nothing but disadvantages. Death also brings about a general weakening of attachments by shattering all the sanskaras which were fed by the earthly objects, because the mind is now torn away from them. While it is true that many of the sadhanas undertaken by the individual during earthly life have the effect of unwinding previous sanskaras, still it is only in extremely rare instances that he succeeds in completely erasing the present and future effects of these sanskaras. This erasure is effected within certain well-defined limits by the sudden transplanting of the individual that occurs at death.
So Baba says it would be a mistake to think that death brings nothing but disadvantage. That means there is an advantage also. Death also brings about a general weakening of attachments by shattering all the sanskaras which were fed by the earthly objects, because the mind is now torn away from them. So that is why I said that death is so important, that those very closely knit or finely attached samskaras at death, there is a shaking, and because of that shaking, much of the samskaras get loosened up. So it's an advantage in that sense. While it is true that many sadhanas undertaken by the individual during the earthly life have the effect of unwinding previous sanskaras, still it is only in extremely rare instances that he succeeds in completely erasing the present and future effects of these sanskaras. In other words, all the sadhanas, which are the devotional exercises that people do, they do help to a certain extent to unwind the sanskaras, but it is very rare that owing to sadhanas and tapasya and all kinds of austerities, you are not able to eradicate or erase all the samskaras. To a certain extent, it may unwind or loosen the fastened samskaras of our mind. So the advantage is that the death shakes up the samskaras.
If the lessons inherent in a single death were to be thoroughly assimilated.
No, I don't think I've read the whole thing. So, which one? The last para? So shall we stop here? Okay. Okay. So this erasure is effected within certain well-defined limits by the sudden transplanting of the individual that occurs at death. Occurs at transplanting would mean, to relocate from one state of mind, state of being to the other. That we are because we are being transplanted from earth, from gross to the semi-subtle or the astral world. in whether it is heaven or hell. So to a certain extent, this transplantation and this sudden transplantation does make an effect of loosening out of certain portion of the sanskaras. Baba uses the word, within well-defined limits, it helps.
If the lessons inherent in a single death were to be thoroughly assimilated by the individual, he would benefit by the equivalent of several lifetimes of patient spiritual effort. Unfortunately, this does not happen in most cases because after death, the individual usually tries to revive his accumulated sanskaras. Through these revived sanskaras, he recaptures the experiences through which he has already lived. The period immediately following death usually becomes, therefore, an occasion for the repetition of all that has previously been lived through, rather than a period of emancipation through understanding all that has been lived out.
Now, this is a very, very important paragraph, and I believe we had similar words we have already read in the discourses, which we did a couple of sessions earlier. If the sessions inherent in if the lessons inherent in a single death were to be thoroughly assimilated by the individual, he would benefit by the equivalent of several lifetimes of patient spiritual effort. If the lessons were learned, after that we are supposed to review what we have done. So now we learn the lessons. That means it would be equivalent to several lifetimes of patient spiritual effort if the lessons were learned in the after death state by looking through our life frame by frame and getting the knowledge from it. Unfortunately, this does not happen in most cases. Now, what happens in most cases, let us see. Because after death, the individual usually tries to revive these accumulated samskaras. You can revive it through mental thinking, through subjective reconstruction. Through these revived sanskaras, he recaptures the experiences through which he has already lived. So far, so good.
You had asked that question.
Yeah,
Like, remember?
We'll come. Soumya, let's finish this. Only 6 minutes, 5 minutes are left. The period, this is important, the period immediately following death usually becomes, therefore, an occasion for the repetition of all that has previously been lived through, rather than a period of emancipation through understanding all that has been lived out. Very important to understand. It is futile, it is useless, it is stupidity, it is foolish just to again live through all that we have lived in when we were on the earth plane, when we were in the gross plane. So instead of doing that, if we understand the learnings, see, I'll repeat the last few lines and we'll end today's session. The period immediately following death usually becomes, therefore, an occasion for the repetition of all that has been previously lived through, rather than a period of emancipation. It is an opportunity for us to free ourselves through proper understanding of what we have lived through. So here Baba says, rather than a period of emancipation, through understanding all that has been lived out. So in other words, that period after death is a very important period for us to capitalize, to make maximum use of by learning the lessons. By learning the lessons, and then that means it is equivalent to several lifetimes of patient spiritual efforts, patient spiritual efforts. Instead of just living again, us going through all these things and enjoying or suffering, no. What is the learning in that? What do we understand? So I think we end here.
Understood.
Any questions?
कितना powerful है वो?
Thank you, Soumya. You are also so powerful. All right. Anything ask? So we end. Thank you, beloved Baba, and thanks to all of you.